What is up, guys? It's your guy Kevin here again, and today I'll be teaching you how to loop in Ableton Live right now. So let's talk about what we need first. First thing you'll need is this thing called a MIDI controller, or if you have a keyboard that supports MIDI, that works fine as well. Now, preferably you'll want something that's a little smaller. You see maybe like 25 keys or 37 keys of the ROM, because if you want to perform live, you probably don't want to be carrying around this little beast here. But if your keyboard is indeed 88 keys, totally fine. As long as it supports MIDI, it'd be fantastic. What else is preferred though is a drum pad if there is one, or mappable buttons. But if you don't have these, totally fine as well. Next up, what we'll need is here, you can see we have Ableton Live. That's the digital audio workstation or DAW we use to do the live looping. Something that you might want to have handy is a metronome that you have on the sides. GarageBand has one. Alright, Android probably has those metronomes. This is to help keep you in the beats while you're doing live loop recordings. If you're only doing your own little recordings here, you don't need no metronomes. Ableton Live has this function. Now let's get into how to do these recordings. First, you want to pick a project that you want to record, or if you want to create your own little loop, that's good as well. But if you're doing a cover, you want to search online for the beats per minute, the tempo of the song, which you'll then set it here. Let me just bring this closer to me. You want to set it here, which is the tempo marking. Next up, you want to know, what time signature is it? 4/4, 3/4, whatever. And next up, you want to enable this metronome thing, okay? And then you want to make sure you have at least 1 bar of counting, all right? Because otherwise it'll be a mess. Next up, you want to set how many bars before the next recording starts. So right now I set it to 1 bar, so then when I do click the record, after 1 bar, it'll start recording your stuff. That's really important, because if you set it too much, it'll become boring. It'll have this huge gap in between where we're not playing anything. And if you don't set any bars, let's say if I set it to none, right here, that's not good either, because you'll be rushing to do everything. Next up, you'll want to make sure you set up your instruments. Now, the most crucial thing of recording these stuff is probably drums. And you'll want to have some drum racks and this and whatnots. If you already know how to do a drum rack, you can skip to the later parts of the video, but if you do not know how to do it, I'll explain it here. On the left-hand side, you have categories, you have sounds and stuff. Go to drums, and you can just drag a drum rack over. I'm not going to drag it over here because I already have them. And what happens is when you click on drum rack, you'll see at the bottom, let me just, you'll see you have this bottom. If you play the different stuff, you'll have these little highlighted orangey stuff. But right now, I already have these imported because I tend to want to import these in a way that, of course, because I don't have a drum pad, I can still play them relatively nice. Something like that. You want to import your maybe hits, your snares, your hi-hats, your crashes, and whatnots. And you want to do these for all the instruments. You want to get the presets done already. Yeah, and this and whatnot. If you only have Ableton Live Lite, it'll only allow you to create 8 of these tracks. That's totally fine. We probably don't need a lot of tracks for these. And you also want to make sure that the order you're doing it in is the order you create these tracks. In order to create a new track, just drag your plugin or whatever instruments over to where it is. So let's say if I want to do this ample guitar, I can just sort of drag them over, which I'm not going to do here because I already said it. Next up, what we'll have to do is you'll have to create these tracks. Now, we want to pre-arm these tracks as well. So usually what we do to create a new track is you click on one of these empty bars And that's why it's crucial to not be in the horizontal view, but in the vertical view, which allows us to arm these tracks. And you want to click on one of those tracks and then go down to where it says notes, and under loop there is this length. And what you want to do is set these length to the amount of bars you're recording in. So what I'm going to be demoing later is Blinding Lights by The Weeknd, which is about 8 bars. So you want to set these to 8 bars. And because I've already set these, I'm not going to do it again. Again, it's under length. And you want to set this to the amount of bars that you're recording. Maybe 4 bars, 2 bars, or whatever. And you want to do the same for every single instrument. You want to create a track like this. And again, it's simply by double clicking on an empty box. And then you can do that. Okay? Next thing we'll have to do is we'll have to arm each individual tracks during our performances. So it's important that we map each button to do what you want it to do. If you don't know what mapping means, it's basically assigning a key to the button. Now, if you have a MIDI controller, you can click on MIDI. I'm talking about like if you have MIDI controllers that have buttons, you can map, you can press MIDI, and then all these purple areas are the areas you can map. If you don't have a MIDI controller that has those buttons or something, or if you have a MIDI controller like this, which don't have mappable buttons, you can go to key, but you can use your computer keyboard in order to map these functions and features. And these orange areas are the ones you can map. There are a couple important buttons you want to map. First thing is, of course, arming each individual instrument rack. You want to assign a different button to each. So for me, I decided to use numbers 1 through 8 on my MacBook. Next thing you'll need to assign are these individual track selectors, which I decided to use QWEASDZX. And you can use whatever kind of letters, numbers you want or whatever on the keyboard, but I want to keep it in the bunch because it makes recording a lot easier. And finally, you'll need to map this button here, which is right next to the little sort of 4 corners thingy, and is the record button, which you'll use to activate the recording function when you're in the looping. Once you've done that, exit out of it, test it out. See, I have these mapped out, and this and whatnots. After this is done, you are ready to get going with your first loop recording. Now, remember what we talked about earlier is you'll get 1 bar of count in to start your first recording. And your first recording will generally be a drum rack. For a very good reason. Drums give you this sense of beats. And of course, if your track is not too difficult, you might not even need a metronome because you can use the drum. But what I would suggest is have an external metronome, maybe on your phone or something that you could plug into your ears, so that if you're doing a live performance, you are hearing a metronome and keeping the beats and others are not hearing it. If you're not doing it live though, like I said, this is perfectly fine. All right, now that you're ready to record these stuff, we'll want to make sure that you start on the first beat, all right? So for the first track, let's arm this for now. And then just click record and wait for 1 bar. Now, wait for the next downbeat of your bar, kind of start and arm your next track. We have armed our second track. You want to wait for bar 1 again to record. So I've saved you a bit of misery of listening to me record everything here, and I've just skipped to the end when I finished every recording, and then we'll just take a listen to the end product. So now that we have all our tracks, let's take a final lesson at the final product. And there you have it. Hope you have enjoyed this tutorial on how to make an Ableton live looping.